Red Dead Redemption captured the hearts of players everywhere, with its vibrant open world, diverse cast of characters, and perhaps most of all, the beautifully executed story. So now, with the next installment in the series on the way, it's a perfect time to catch up on the events of the original game. Whether you've never played Red Dead Redemption, or it's been a while and you just need a refresher, here's the story of Red Dead Redemption, super simplified.
Come on, let's go!
John Marston's story begins long before the opening scene of the game. Red Dead Redemption is as much about Marston's past as it is about his present and future. For much of the game, Marston's motivations are unclear. All he tells anyone is that he's a former outlaw trying to go straight, and he's loosely working with the government to find Bill Williamson. The first thing you see is Marston standing outside of Fort Mercer, hollering at his old friend and outlaw associate Williamson to give up and turn himself in. That confrontation ends with Marston being shot and left for dead outside the fort. Luckily, Marston is picked up and nursed back to health by Bonnie McFarlane. He pays his debt back to the McFarlane family by helping them fend off some cattle rustlers and odd jobs around the farm, which may or may not cheekily double as the tutorial. From there, Marston starts putting together a more complicated plan to attack Fort Mercer. He brings together local law enforcement and some shady business people to launch a full-scale assault on the outlaw gang. The attack succeeds, at least in bringing down the gang. Williamson, it turns out, has already fled to Mexico to join up with another of their former gang members, Javier Escuela.
I heard you was coming. You took your time, no?
With the help of his perpetually drunk arms dealer friend Irish, Marston crosses the border into Mexico to look for Escuela and Williamson. But in doing so, he turns away from all the friends and associates he's made and starts over completely alone. In his search, he finds himself working with Colonel Agustin Allende of the Mexican army, which seems to have a bad habit of executing civilians for little to no reason whatsoever. It isn't long before that partnership breaks down, and Marston finds himself working with a growing rebel movement led by Abraham Reyes. Marston doesn't seem to especially care about the cause, and stays away from really taking sides any more than he has to. He's not trying to cause a revolution in Mexico, no matter how much Reyes and his obviously devoted and in love, although sadly naive follower, Luisa Fortuna, preach to him about it.
Well, best of luck to both of you, but I need to find 2 men so I can return to America.
Marston is really just allowing himself to get used by the rebel movement because they are his only lead on finding Williamson and Escuela. John finds himself in this position frequently, working as a gun for hire, selling his services to whomever helps him get closer to his goal. Marston eventually helps the Mexican rebels overthrow the brutal military government, which feels like an empty victory, as Reyes immediately shows signs of being the exact same type of heartless leader he just overthrew.
Mexico is mine!
But in helping the rebels, Marston finds Escuela and Williamson. Escuela can be captured or killed, but Williamson will go down fighting no matter what. And here it finally becomes clear what is driving John to do what he's doing. John learns that federal agents have captured his wife and son and are holding them captive. To get them back, Marston, still at the mercy of the merciless government regime, he has the task of bringing the leaders of Dutch's gang, the gang of outlaws he used to ride with, to justice. With Escuela and Williamson out of the picture, there's only one person left for Marston to track down: Dutch de Vanderlyn, the leader and namesake of Dutch's gang, and John's old brother in arms.
We all make mistakes, John. I never claimed to be a saint, but equally, I never took you for an errand boy.
Upon John's return to the United States, the mysterious men that have been pulling Marston's strings finally reveal themselves. Edgar Ross, the director of the Bureau of Investigation, has been tasked by the federal government to tame the Wild West, and he's using the entire Marston family to do it. After John takes care of Escuela and Williamson, he travels to West Elizabeth to meet up with Ross in the city of Blackwater. West Elizabeth is unlike any other location. Rather than being desert-like, it's heavily wooded, while Blackwater is a fully industrialized city. It is here that Marston takes on his final set of missions, directly from Ross and his associates, as they help to track down Dutch and end their forced partnership. And they are able to do it, but Dutch isn't really a dangerous outlaw anymore. He's a broken man who realizes that his idealistic movement was a failure. He saw himself as a modern-day Robin Hood, but he shows that he understands his movement was a failure with his final words:
Our time has passed, John.
With Dutch's death, Marston has his wife and son back and begins living as a simple farmer. But it isn't long before Ross comes back to tie up the final loose end, Marston himself. Despite agreeing to leave him alone with the family, Ross brings a large contingent of the US Army to confront Marston. Marston ensures his family is able to escape and stands up to the entire army himself, taking a few down with him before ultimately falling to dozens of gunshots. Three years later, John's son, Jack Marston, tracks down Ross and kills him in revenge for killing his father. Ross gets justice for betraying John Marston, but now that Jack has killed a federal agent, he has also become an aimless outlaw. Exactly what John didn't want his son to be. Just as Dutch suggested, the writing is on the wall for the Old West the moment the federal agents arrived on the scene. And it's not just the outlaws, it's the entirety of the Western way of life on the way out. Settlers who had until recently been depending on a loose system of vigilante justice and self-reliance now have to rely on the feds to come in and restore their own version of law and order. That means bringing an end to the roving gangs of outlaws, but it also brings its own kind of trouble. Ross and his associates from back east don't really care about helping the people of the West improve their lives. And just like everyone else, they grease the wheels of their authority with dirty money and shady deals, like the one they struck with Marston. What Ross and the Bureau are after is basically expanding federal power to settled Western land. Eliminating Dutch's gang, even though it's a shadow of itself, is about taking down a powerful group that poses a potential threat to federal authority. John Marston is a pawn in all of this. He was targeted by the federal government because he had a family and was trying to do the right thing, but that made him exploitable, and after Marston did everything that was asked of him, the government disposed of him. This way, Ross ensures that he's tied up all the loose ends with Dutch's gang, and also destroys the biggest piece of evidence of his collaboration with Marston. If Red Dead Redemption's conclusion in 1914 marks the end of Western frontier life, then Red Dead Redemption 2 will show us the high point of it. Red Dead Redemption 2 is a prequel that will focus on Dutch's gang during its heyday. It should fill in the gaps of the backstory that's only occasionally alluded to in the original Red Dead Redemption. The story of Red Dead Redemption 2 will follow Arthur Morgan, an enforcer and debt collector for Dutch's gang. And because the story takes place before the events of the first game, it is likely that we will see a very different side of some beloved characters, including John Marston himself. What are you hoping to see from the next installment in the Red Dead franchise? What characters do you want to see, and what stories would you like to play out? Tell us in the comments about your story predictions or your wish list for what you hope to see, and as always, enjoy the game.